What's up, guys? Mr. SLIN, and today we're recording a YouTube video. Chat wanted me to record it live on stream, so here we are. I figured I'd give them a little corner to also participate in the video. Today we're doing the top 5 most common mistakes that Risk players make, and this is a video idea that someone in chat gave me, so we're gonna record it. I hate it when people do top 5 videos and like they start with the worst tip and they end on the best tip. So we're going to do it in reverse order. I'm going to start with the best tip, and then I'll give you like descending order of until we get the worst tip. So here we go with number 1. So the first risk mistake is that people defend their borders way too much. When you're starting in the game, you're really distrusting of other players. And so what you'll do is you'll put your armies directly on the borders, right up against all your borders. So for example, if you're in Europe, you would buff like Iceland and Southern Europe and like Ukraine. You just like have all the borders. Or if you're holding Africa, you'd have like East Africa, Egypt, and North Africa. Try and defend every border you possibly can. The main problem with doing this is well, actually there's 2 problems. One, you're going to piss off all your neighbors because you've got your borders in aggressive positions where they're ready to attack, and people don't like the idea that you're going to attack them. And the second problem is that it forces you to spread your armies out onto multiple territories. So you end up spreading yourself very thin. So instead of having a really strong army, you've got a really weak army that's spread out onto multiple territories. So the solution to this problem is to actually group your army into one territory if possible, and also keep a territory of one borders around you, meaning you would have these territories with like a single unit in it. And what that shows everyone else on the board is that you're not going to attack, because you cannot attack through your own territories. And so recognizing that you should be not defending your borders, but actually behind your borders will actually allow you to typically protect all of your borders while grouped up and not being threatening to other players on the board, so they'll like you more. Now, of course, all rules are made to be broken. And so there are some times where you need to defend your borders, and there are some times when you don't want to defend your borders. And so that's part of what makes someone a good Risk player, is understanding when they should and should not defend their borders. But for the most part, it's very, very common for people who are starting out in the game to really mess this up and over defend their borders when they don't need to. Tip number 2 is failing to take a card on your turn. Sometimes what people do is they'll like skip their turn and not take a card. And the reason why that's a mistake is because cards actually give you lots of units per turn. Because in the fixed card game, you could turn in 3 cards, and the minimum it'll give you is 4 units, and the maximum it'll give you is 12 units. And so you kind of split that down the middle, like 8. So each card is worth about, 3 units each, is what I typically say. Each card's worth about 3 units. So if you think about it, the minimum number of units you'll get in a turn is 3. And then getting a card is another 3. So basically, by getting a card, you're doubling your unit production each turn. So when you don't take a card, you're reducing your unit production by 50%. And that's why the no continent strategy works so well, because when you're playing a no continent strategy, meaning you don't take a continent in the game, so other people have continents, you don't have one, you're getting 6 units per turn. Compare that to someone who has Australia. They're getting the 3 from the start. They're getting the 2 from Australia, and they're getting another 3 from the card. So they're getting 8 units per turn. As a no continent player, you're only getting a -2 per turn, and you're actually keeping up. You're getting like 75% of the production that someone who has Australia would have. So it's actually really good. But if you're not taking that card, playing a no continent game, you're getting 3 units per turn versus 8, then you're like really, really falling behind. So it's very important that you try and take cards each turn. There are, again, all rules made to be broken. There are some points in time where you will not take a card, but I would say like 99 out of 100 times, you're going to need to try and take a card with each turn. All right, tip number 3 is being too aggressive and throwing away units. And this happens a lot for new players in the early game. So in the early game, a lot of times people will be kind of like trying to take a continent, right? Or they're trying to get into the right positions. And so they'll over attack and be overly aggressive. And oftentimes they'll end up throwing away a lot of units. So when you watch me play, if you go watch any of my videos, you'll notice in the early game, I typically take only 1 territory per turn. It's very rare, unless it's like a very specific opportunity, that I will be attacking multiple units or multiple territories. Typically, I'll just take 1 territory per turn because that's the minimum that I need to get a card. And then I'll just fortify. And that just guarantees that I'm not throwing away too many units and being too aggressive. If you're too aggressive, you're pissing people off because you're attacking more than you're chilling, right? And people like other people to chill. So if you're just attacking, you're just being aggressive, being a little bit too much. Like people are not going to like that. They're like, hey, this guy's upsetting the flow of the board. They're upsetting, they're stirring up trouble, and we don't like that person. So being too aggressive has that problem. It thins you out because you're taking your army and you're attacking multiple territories. So it's kind of spreading your army out when you don't want to be spread out. I explained to you earlier that you want to stay consolidated. And yeah, hopefully that explains that tip. Okay. Tip number 4. So whereas tip number 3 is being too aggressive and throwing away units, actually tip number 4 is the opposite of that. There are times when I'm seeing people that are being too passive. So I know it's like a little bit like Goldilocks, like, don't be too aggressive, don't be too passive. A lot of times people are way too passive and they miss opportunities to win. But this typically doesn't happen in the early game, because in the early game, like I said, you're typically playing a slow, methodical style. But near the middle game to end game, so the mid game to late game, sometimes people will be just a little bit too passive and missing opportunities to win the game. There are a couple different opportunities you want to be looking for. One opportunity would be trying to take a continent. Like there's opportunities to take a better continent or shut someone down from taking their continent. A really common one is missing an opportunity to kill. So like in Hearthstone, when you have lethal, and this game Risk, when you have lethal, that's when you have more units than the other human players combined. And so you want to be in the mid and late game checking to see, okay, can I win the game right now? And you need to just like ask yourself that question. And even when you get to like really high levels, people miss lethal, it happens. And when you watch my game, sometimes I miss lethal too. Like I had an opportunity to win. I forgot to count it up and I just missed an opportunity to win. And that's unfortunate because if another turn goes by, sometimes that window of opportunity closes and it's no longer there anymore. What happens oftentimes is people will just kind of like, they settle into the mid game. Everybody has a continent. They're just going to like click next every turn, just dump the units into the same continent, and then we're in a stalemate, right? So don't let that happen. There's oftentimes opportunities to break up a stalemate to kind of get the board moving in the right direction. And if you're way too conservative, if you're way too passive, people might actually gang up on you because they don't like what you're doing. This happens oftentimes to the turtling Australia player. You're like sitting there turtling in Australia, and then people will just start ganging up on you because you're just turtling really hard and they don't like that. So there's a balance, right? You want to not be too aggressive because people don't like that. If you're too turtly and you're not helping to kill people and progress the game, and you're actually helping the stalemate to continue, like people don't want you to like stalemate the game out. So, being too passive can also hurt you as well. All right. And the last tip I have is people sometimes fail to prioritize alliances. And what I mean by this is that Risk is a game that's like a very social game, and it's a free-for-all, but you can form alliances, and that's where like alliances are extremely important. And oftentimes people don't place enough importance on forming alliances, and you absolutely need to form alliances in order to win the game. It's very, very rare that 3 people in a complete free-for-all will result in someone winning. Like more often than not, you're going to need to team up with other people in order to progress the game forward and win. Go watch any game of Risk through that lens, and you'll realize that 2 people have like a border that they don't need to protect with each other because they have this really strong alliance. And so they're able to use that alliance to kind of like turn 2 individual players into like a team. And if you're on a 4-player board and 2 people team up, that's half of the players on the board teaming up and wiping everybody else out. So alliances are super, super important. And manipulating those alliances and breaking those alliances and using those alliances to kill people, that's where the fun of Risk is, right? So don't ignore those alliances. Make sure you use them to your advantage. I would say in the early game, you can oftentimes form an alliance with somebody and build trust with them. And as the trust builds, then you're able to use that alliance to do more and more and more. And you can break those alliances, you can break that trust, but do it very sparingly, because oftentimes once you break that trust, it's really, really hard to get it back. It's kind of like if you cheat on your significant other, if you cheat on your boyfriend or your girlfriend, if you cheat on them, they might forgive you, but they're going to be really distrusting. It'll be hard to get it back. And oftentimes relationships, when you cheat on someone, just completely over because the trust is completely gone. I've never cheated on someone, so I don't really know what that feels like. But if you break your alliance in Risk, it's not exactly the same level. It's not exactly the same as bad, but it's You get what I'm trying to say. It's a metaphor. Okay. All right. That's going to wrap up the video. Shout out to chat. I didn't read chat at all for this entire video. Hope you guys didn't say something stupid. Thanks everyone for watching. And yeah, don't forget to subscribe for more of this content. I stream every day, 9 p.m. till midnight Pacific time. And I'll catch you on the next video. Peace.